Okay, it's now 7:30 p.m. on the dot. Yes, welcome back to Stellar Media, and it's Friday Night Live with me, ST Sarfaraz Takola, the one and only. And we're coming to you live from our headquarters in Johannesburg tonight. Now, we've got two parts of the tech talk. It's time to delve into part one of that. We're talking to Jan Vermulan from MyBroadband tonight. We discuss Google's threat to leave Australia, as obviously there's a legislation apparently now that allows for Google to pay news organizations and smaller marketing agencies and companies, etc. And we're also going to be discussing, if they do decide to take the search engine off the market in Australia, there could be opportunity for Bing, Yahoo, and many others and the like. Now, to talk to us a bit more, we welcome none other than the senior journalist at MyBroadband, Jan Vermulan, to the program.
How are you doing? Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Jan, good evening to you and welcome once again. Great to have you with us, man.
It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for the opportunity.
Awesome stuff. So as I said, this is the Tech Talk Part 1. Part 2, we're going to be having, we are going to be chatting about e-gaming a bit later on. Now, Jan's going to be discussing with us tonight Google's threat about leaving the Australian market and what are some of the ramifications this is going to have. Now, Google is obviously forced to back down on its threat to leave Australia. Scott Morrison was saying that the search engine giant is more positive about the future that is down under. However, there's a regulator found a power imbalance between media and Google and Facebook. Now, Google has largely, rolled back the threat to leave Australia. And there was a constructive video with CEO Sundar Pichai. And this has been making headlines for the viewers and listeners who actually don't know about this. So this has been massive news. I mean, firstly, Australia is a massive market. Now, a number of talking points that we are going to be discussing. Now, first things first, Jan, talk to us about Google's intent and this threat to suddenly just rock up and say, okay, we want to leave the Australian market. Why would such a tech giant do such in such a well-established first world country? Or developed country?
Yeah, exactly. Like a mature economy, or shall we call them rich countries? Exactly. So I heard an economist who was weighing in on the GameStop situation, calling developed economies rich countries. I think that's fair. And Australia, what's happening down there is the regulator in Australia has said that platforms like Google are going to have to start paying publishers to show their links. And Google has said that this is going to break search. And if Australia continues to implement the law as drafted, then they will have no choice but to leave the Australian market. And what's happened in the meantime is they have started having discussions around other stuff. So Google has launched a product that it's had and been testing out in other markets called Google News Showcase. And so what Google's argument here is that they're willing to pay publishers, but they have to be able to provide value. And the value that they're talking about is they're talking about investing around $1 billion into news publishers. It's not just in Australia, it's around the world. And they then they curate some of the news articles published by these news organizations and then effectively republish them in Google News Showcase. This includes paywalled articles. So, when you hit the Wall Street Journal or the Economist or another site that has a paywall up, or here in South Africa, we've got a couple of news websites.
Like Times Live, etc. Daily Maverick has started.
And News 24 has started with paywalls. I don't think Daily Maverick has paywalls, but they've got a thing that comes up that says, do you want to donate some money or do you want to sign up? And then there's like a hidden link that can say, no, I don't want to do any of these things right now. But News 24 is got paywalls up for the first time ever. And so Google's proposal is that rather than just paying someone to point to have a link to their stuff in Google, which would be, I do agree that's, I understand as someone who works in the media that, the media needs better support from search engines which rely on our content. But paying for the privilege of showing a link is a little, can be a slippery slope. because it won't just stop at news organizations. Obviously, everybody else is going to want in on that. And which news organizations qualify? If you're an independent blogger, do you get paid, or must you be a big conglomerate media organization
or media house?
Like a big. But I mean, the thing is, in South Africa, anybody can basically register with whoever, the Association of Independent Publishers, the South African National Editors Forum, or just directly with the Press Council. Does that then qualify them to receive payment from Google for displaying links? And so it's very much the same kind of questions they would have to ask in the Australian context. Is so then who gets paid? That problem doesn't go away, by the way, with Google's proposal. But at least with Google's proposal, they're saying, let's exchange value for value. You give me articles and I pay you for them, rather than me just paying for the privilege of linking to your site, because that's not sustainable.
Now, this obviously, before we talk about leaving a gap in the market, a potential gap for the likes of other search engine companies, do you think from a business perspective, the CEO of Google, and Sundar Pichai and Scott Morrison are talking about COVID-19. Is this perhaps something to monetize? Basically, maybe perhaps they've had a bit of a slump in terms of them business, although we've seen Amazon's shares really rise in the last few weeks or so, but Google, Facebook, etc. Do you think maybe COVID has contributed to this from a monetary perspective? What do you think is the end game here?
Are you talking about from the news organization's perspective?
From the news organizations.
So no, COVID isn't to blame here. This is a problem that's been coming for years. COVID might accelerate problems that inherently exist, like we saw in South Africa with a lot of magazines shutting down, old magazines shutting down because who buys magazines anymore, kind of thing.
Right.
Yeah. And for the people who do buy magazines can't go out and buy them because of the lockdowns, at least in the beginning of the lockdowns. There were tremendous restrictions on what you could buy and what you couldn't buy and on all that stuff. No, it's not a COVID specific thing. This has been something that news publishers in particular, have been complaining about for years, because the fact is Google, Facebook, and Twitter are destroying us, right? And I'm not saying that lightly. So Google, through Google Ads, has and Facebook and Twitter as well, have completely destroyed. They've taken the bottom out of the online advertising industry. So it is now so dirt cheap to place an ad using Google Ads that no one will pay a reasonable fee to pay for ads on a relatively small news publisher, unless you are incredibly successful in a particular niche. And so, and you've got an established set of clients and stuff. Basically, if you've been in business, if you've been in business since before Google was huge, then you're okay. But if you're going into business now, it's a struggle. Why would someone place ads with you as an online publisher when they can go to Facebook?
Yeah,
and Facebook, for that matter, who can with laser focus target certain demographics of people. And so and that's been quite controversial after the Cambridge Analytica scandal. But the fact is that these companies, because of the way that they not only do advertising, the way they price advertising, and they are able to do that partially based on content that news publishers produce, right? So a lot of news content gets posted to Facebook and then shared around, and Facebook is able to place ads around that. So even though they're not getting the content that you've written, they are displaying ads around the headlines and your headline image. They take your title image, they'll take your headline, they'll take your excerpt. And so publishers do have a bit of an argument there to go, listen, you're taking at least some of our content from these news articles to use in Google search, then monetizing it, and in so doing, eating our lunch, so to speak. So what must we do? right? Obviously, we're going to say, well, you need to start paying then, because if you're going to be taking our advertisers, and you're going to be, not only that, we're going to take those same advertisers and put them around content that we provide, or at least the links to content that we provide, with our headline images, our headlines, our excerpts, then the money has to come from somewhere. And Correct. It's going to be you, because you're the ones gobbling up all the digital ad revenue. And so this whole thing was inevitable, but finding a workable solution is tricky. As I said, I completely understand that, forcing Google to pay for links to news is not tenable. I'm not sure the answer is for Google to specifically curate news stories from certain publishers, because that locks the market in, right? So if you want to then launch a competing news website, well, good luck to you. Right. I mean, it's like, how are you gonna get your pound of flesh from Google without growing to a substantial size, and how are you gonna do that? So, like, this whole thing is an incredibly difficult thing to navigate. I don't envy the Australian regulator, because they're breaking.
Monopolization in terms of pay ads, etc. Now, this doesn't only affect Australia. This would affect New Zealand as well, because obviously Mel Silver mentioned to the Australia and the New Zealand consumers and public alike. Now, I want to talk about, where does this now fit for Microsoft, Bing, Yahoo, other search engines? There's an opportunity laying here, potentially. Right. Now, from a business perspective, they're probably hungry for the business. Like, hey, let's go in and, grab the bull by the horns. I mean, literally, Google is giving us this. What do you think now is going through their minds, and what kind of strategies do you think they're going to come with, or, put forward here?
Well, whatever they do, whatever gap they want to try and take is wholly dependent on what Google and the Australian government does here, what they ultimately decide on. So Microsoft has come out in full support of the Australian regulation, because obviously they'll benefit from it, right? So if Google decides to leave the market, Microsoft, that leaves it open to the likes of Microsoft, but not only Microsoft with Bing, also a search engine like DuckDuckGo, for example, right? And there are other ways, as we might say, there are many ways to skin a cat. And one of those ways is, then, if you want to force me to pay for links to news content, I won't show it, right? So I'll just remove that stuff from my search engine then, and figure out a different way to do this. Like, for example, the Google News Showcase that Google is trying to work around. And so, they'll be quite excited about the prospect of Google just vacating a country in which it has over 90% market share, and leaving this massive gap in the market. And so that's, but whether that actually comes to pass, I'm not so sure Google would, while they, the threat was really to raise awareness of what was going on. I sincerely doubt that they would actually do that. That's really the nuclear option. That's like, we've sat around the table. We've not been able to get through to the Australian government to figure out a solution that better suits us. Fine, now we're going to leave.
Now, has there been, examples of this kind of thing elsewhere around the globe? Have we seen, Google use this type of strategy, or other tech giants? And when it comes to from a regulatory perspective, come up with this type of thing? Have we seen this around the world? And can this potentially happen here in South Africa?
Yeah, so Australia is breaking ground here. So the European Union has been historically the jurisdiction that has been most strict when it comes to big tech and social media. But in this case, it's Australia leading the pack. And so this is why they're in a tricky spot, is they're the ones trying to break new ground here to protect their local news organizations from the threat that Google represents. That's not to say that tech giants haven't behaved badly in other markets and regulators haven't taken notice. So regulators have cracked down on Google in the European Union, on Facebook, on Amazon. And so, in particular, in the United States, Amazon is facing, Facebook is facing litigation over its monopoly in the social media space and the way it's sharing data between Facebook and Instagram and WhatsApp, for example.
Yes, so and this new WhatsApp policy that's coming out, I think on the 8th of Feb, we all have to accept it. And we've seen a surge in people.
That's been pushed out to May. So WhatsApp's already kicked the can down the road there because they could see that there was something
in Telegram,
brewing.
Viber,
yes, and so they've kicked the can down the road to hopefully. I think what they're hoping for is that the hype dies down and that people just kind of stick with WhatsApp. Inertia carries them through, and then people will just agree.
We're just going to click the I agree button. Skip the T's and C's. It's the normal.
I think that's what they're hoping for. I think that's what they're hoping for. But I hope that people continue to. While I think the whole situation with WhatsApp was a little overblown, I think it's fantastic that I don't care why or how it happened. I'm just happy that people are starting to ask deep questions about the amount of data that they share with these platforms to receive a free service and how that data may be used. I think though, if you're going to delete WhatsApp but keep Facebook on your phone, then you're going to have to start evaluating what you will really gain from that. But it's still good, I think, that people are asking these questions. And Amazon is another big one. It's facing tremendous criticism in the United States for the way it's treating its workers. And Amazon also facing criticism over the way it kind of handles small businesses on its platform, right? So Amazon offers this marketplace where you can sell your products through Amazon. You use their logistics, their warehousing. We've got a very similar thing here in South Africa through Takealot, and other companies are trying to compete in that space here in South Africa. And then what we've heard from some reports is that a small business puts their product on Amazon, and then they see Amazon like it's basically starting to sell that product themselves and undercutting the small business that was selling that product on Amazon, even selling it below cost, effectively putting the other person doing business through Amazon completely out of business, and then Amazon takes over that business. And so Amazon is also not squeaky clean here. It's got its own reputation for shady business practices that have fallen under the eyes of regulators around the world.
Now, Jan, I want to move a bit off here to Telegram and the privacy policy, because we've just touched about WhatsApp, Facebook, and them halting it until at least May, when they're hoping, as a behavioral perspective, of their consumers to just agree. Now, Telegram is another platform similar to the likes of your WhatsApp, Viber, and messaging apps, right? There was an article that was on the Business Insider some time ago where Telegram in SA, and the privacy policies there, it's so easy, or rather it's so easily accessible for, rather, let's say, the purchasing of narcotics and, all things sinister are so easily available because they don't have such privacy policies as opposed to the likes of your WhatsApps in terms of watchdog, etc. I was reading this article. It was, I think, on the 14th of Jan or so. It's a Business Insider article, and they made mention about this. Now, millions of people around the world, and many in SA, they've obviously downloaded Telegram because of what we've just discussed, right, Jan? What do you make of Telegram and the... what I'm saying is sometimes it's better to stick to the devil that you maybe know,
So you've touched on a couple of big things, and perhaps we can talk about the larger point on WhatsApp versus Telegram, and the fact that I think people are jumping ship from WhatsApp to Telegram without really understanding how Telegram works. A far better alternative, if you're really serious about privacy and security, is Signal. So folks can check out Signal. That's
CIG or SIG?
SIG, okay. Exactly like you would say it in English or write it in English. SIGNAL, and that's not my opinion. That's the opinion of Edward Snowden. So the guy who whistle blew on the CIA and
WikiLeaks
is now hiding in Russia. Not WikiLeaks, but sort of in the same WhatsApp group. If you want. So Edward Snowden, his endorsement of Signal was that he uses it every day and he's still not dead. And I don't think you can get a stronger endorsement than that. So regarding the other points you touched on, we covered it on MyBroadband as well. And it comes from basically a tweet that social media specialist lawyer Emma Sadler put out, where she said that Telegram has this location-based service where you can look up groups near you and people near you, and that then lets you discover ways to buy illicit stuff. Like the most illicit in my neighborhood was alcohol. Right during the lockdown, people were bartering Johnny Walker and Black Label and stuff to try. During the lockdown, when you're not allowed to be selling alcohol, people were selling alcohol through these groups, and that's just one example. The other stuff that you spoke about, like narcotics and so on, that also happens through these platforms and other vices as well. And then Telegram has a bit of a reputation of being used by terrorist groups. But the fact is that it need not be Telegram. This stuff can happen on WhatsApp as well, right? WhatsApp has end-to-end encryption. If you use it right, then you're also untraceable on WhatsApp. It just so happens that Telegram maybe had better PR in that respect as a secure platform, and so you had these groups, from black market sellers to terrorist groups using Telegram in much the same way as they might use a Bitcoin marketplace like Silk Road, the former Silk Road, to move stuff illicitly, right? And so Telegram has a reputation as being aggressively pro freedom of speech. They do remove objectionable content when it's reported. They've got a code of conduct or a terms of service that lets them do that. And so obviously terrorist content isn't allowed, like hate speech, harassment, that sort of stuff. Violence against others, like advocating for violence against others, that's just out. And when it gets reported on Telegram, it gets removed. But it's a game of whack-a-mole, right? You delete one group and there's 3 others that you don't know about flying under the radar. And so this does happen. And to any parents perhaps watching or listening, if you're looking at switching to Telegram and your kids have perhaps installed Telegram, go and take a look at that location setting. And so you can block Telegram's access to the phone's location services. Because that potentially exposes your child to stuff that you don't want them to see. And secondly, there's actually a bug in Telegram's people nearby feature where if someone exploits it in the right way, they can pinpoint your exact location if you use people nearby. Now, it's off by default. So people nearby is off by default. But you
can activate it, obviously.
But you can activate it, and a kid might just do it out of curiosity. So my advice is to disable location services on to Telegram. Your child can reactivate that, so it is necessary to have a conversation about why that's done and why they shouldn't go in there. Except if you're an iPhone. iPhone has like this whole parental control thing, which works really well, which lets you disable permissions for specific apps and block your child from re-enabling those permissions. Android isn't quite that sophisticated yet, as far as I can tell. And so those are just some of the issues around WhatsApp versus Telegram. The other thing I wanted to really talk about is that Telegram handles message encryption quite differently. WhatsApp is end-to-end encrypted by default, and people often challenge me and say, "How do you know WhatsApp is end-to-end encrypted?" So the last we know, WhatsApp implemented the exact same encryption as Signal does.
If I can just come in for a second,
sure.
Just for those who don't understand end-to-end encryption, look,
yes.
we understand cryptography and all of these cryptocurrencies, etc. For those who don't understand end-to-end encryption, just give a brief.
Yeah, a quick one. It sounds complicated. It's not. All it means is that when you send a message on your phone, it is encoded and then it's sent over the internet. Not even Facebook or WhatsApp can read that message. You're the only one with or actually the person that's receiving the message is the only one with a key to unlock that message, to decode it. And so that's it. That's what end-to-end means, is it's encrypted on your phone and then decrypted on the receiving end. And so WhatsApp uses the exact same encryption system. It's called the Signal protocol, as Signal does. Now, yes, it is perhaps possible that Facebook has weakened that encryption, since the actual people at Signal, there's a hacker with a very good reputation in the information security industry. His name he goes by Moxie Marlinspike, such a hacker name, and he's the one who basically developed the Signal protocol, and he along with his team built that into WhatsApp. Facebook paid them to do it. And so yes, it's conceivable. And so it's conceivable that Facebook has weakened its version of the Signal protocol over time, but I don't think that that's something we wouldn't have noticed. Like, they would have broken compatibility, I think, between different people, because you've got WhatsApp running all over the show, so you've got WhatsApp running on Android and iPhones, and then still on some other phones that we don't talk about a lot, like I think Jai phones and stuff, where WhatsApp runs. So if you mess with the encryption, then it'll break. And so if WhatsApp messed with what Marlinspike did, then it would have broken in some way that we would have noticed, I think. And so that's how we can say with like 95% certainty that WhatsApp is end-to-end encrypted. It's because we trust Moxie Marlinspike and the Signal protocol, and they said that they did it properly, and so we trust that it's done properly in WhatsApp. Now, Telegram doesn't do end-to-end encryption by default. It does what it calls cloud chats. So when you chat to someone on Telegram, your messages are stored on Telegram servers, and Telegram has the keys to decrypt those messages. Now, Telegram has a very good track record here. It hasn't handed people's information over to governments requesting it and or any of that kind of stuff. But that it still can. And that's something I think worth considering. Telegram does have a feature called secret chats, which works exactly the same as WhatsApp, basically, except that they perhaps have a theoretically weaker encryption system because they built it themselves. Yeah. And so, there's all these trade-offs to consider before just blindly jumping from WhatsApp to Telegram. I understand if you're angry at Facebook and you want to show them that you're angry, but if you're really serious about privacy and security, switch to Signal rather than Telegram.
Well, I think after this interview, a lot of people are going to be looking at Signal. And Jan, the thing is, and I mean, you mentioned that Ed Snowden obviously endorsed it. Great to obviously see that. But I'm also going to look at the Signal app as well, delve a bit deeper into that. And but that's where we leave it tonight, Jan. That's all that we have the time for, unfortunately, for this very informative discussion. As always, sharing your wealth of experience when it comes to all things tech savvy in the ICT space. Jan Vermulan, senior journalist at MyBroadband. We thank you so much tonight, and we love the time, by the way.
Have a great evening.
You too, my man. Cheers, man. Have an awesome one. Take care. Cheers.
Bye-bye.
It's Jan Vermulan, senior journalist at MyBroadband, talking to us in the Tech Talk Part 1 segment about Google's threat to leave the Australian market. And also we touched on about WhatsApp and end-to-end encryption. and Telegram, and the threats that are obviously open on the Telegram app in South Africa as well. So don't just rush yet. Go have a look at an app called Signal, Signal. Well, hey, I'm going to check it out and I'll give you my verdict. But anyway, it's now 8 p.m. on the dot, and the time for a quick ad break. Thereafter, we carry on with Tech Talk Part 2 coming up. We chat to a young lady by the name of Bahia Khan. Stay tuned.